Today I'd like to say to you a word about Moses, a word about the law, and a word about love. But first I want to remind you of the easy way of remembering the 10 Commandments. And I'm going to do this several times through today's sermon. Several years ago I did this. You may remember, you may not. But it is worth remembering, so let's go through it. You use your fingers. Bring anything to mind? Okay. The first one, I am the Lord your God, right? It points to God. The second one, you shall have no other gods before me. So there is not two, there is only one. The third one is a W, which is a W for your words. Do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain with your words. Watch your words. The fourth one, the thumb, is keeping Sabbath. See how it's resting? You make the 4, and the thumb is resting. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The fifth one, 5, looks like a pledge. Honor your father and your mother. The sixth one, we've got 5 over here. The sixth one looks like a gun. So, you shall not commit murder. The seventh one is 2 people walking down the aisle. Honor your marriage. You shall not commit adultery. The 8th one looks like bars, because if you steal, you end up in jail. You shall not steal. The 9th one, now the thumb is whispering behind everybody's back about other people. Yeah, so you shall not bear false witness. You shall not lie. And the 5th one is 2 open hands. You shall not covet. Right? 2 open hands. I don't want what you have. I accept what is. Got it? You'll remember it now forever. I'll go through it a couple times. Actually, it'll be like, what was 8 again? 8's the hardest. You're like, I don't remember this one because it's 4 and 4. You'll get it. A word about Moses. When we think about Moses, we usually think about him and his power. Right? Here he is coming down off the mountain. Here he is with his staff separating the waters. By the way, what did Moses say to his hairdresser? I like to part it right down the middle. Yeah. Think about that. I was going to start with that, but I'd throw it in. We think about Moses and his power. We think about Moses leading the Israelites through the wilderness. What I want you to remember about Moses, what's special about him as the mediator of the law, is that Moses has experienced, maybe rarely among people, all of the different social classes. Oftentimes, people, if you're born into poverty, you may remain poor. If you're born into power, you may remain powerful. If you are born into riches, you may remain rich. If you are a sojourner or a stranger, you may always be sojourning. Moses was all of these things. And it helped to teach Moses' heart and empathy about human beings because he saw things from both sides. Moses began his life, his sort of aware life in Pharaoh's house. He started as someone who was very, very powerful. And it seems like for several decades, he saw himself as a member of Pharaoh's house, even possibly one of Pharaoh's many sons. And then he is told that he's actually a Hebrew. That he was actually born to the Hebrew people. And suddenly in that moment, his eyes open. And although he's very powerful and in Pharaoh's house, he starts to see what's happening to the Hebrews. And he realizes this is happening to my people. Everything he had ever done as a member of Pharaoh's house, that he had ever done as a member of a person of power, he was doing to himself. Right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Suddenly he saw everything that was happening to the Hebrews as things that was happening to him and to his own people. So that he finally gets driven out of Egypt because he tries to protect a Hebrew from being harmed by one of Pharaoh's guards. And in fact pushes the guard, and the guard ends up falling and dying. And now Moses is so afraid because now he stood with the Hebrews, and he feels like he's going to have to suffer. And so having gone from being powerful and rich to seeing himself as a person who was a slave and oppressed, now he has to flee out into the wilderness, and he becomes a stranger. He becomes a sojourner. He realizes what it's like where you have absolutely nothing. And anytime you encounter people, you have to rely on them and their kindness and hospitality for anything you might have. You have no water, but you have it if they give it to you. Right? You have no standing unless they as a people decide you have standing. And so he recognized how good and important it was to have these kinds of qualities as a people, to have the hospitality, to have the care, to have the empathy for those who are around you. When Moses finally comes in to confront Pharaoh again, he comes as a person who has seen life from every side, which is maybe what makes him the perfect person to try to talk Pharaoh out of his oppression of these people. You can imagine Moses trying to appeal to his empathy, but Pharaoh never had it. Because Pharaoh was powerful and always been powerful. Pharaoh was rich and had always been rich. Pharaoh couldn't put his heart and mind into the place of what it was like to be these people. In some ways, the last of the 10 plagues, horrible as it was, to kill the firstborn was a divine act of empathy created, right? Because the Israelites had been losing their firstborn by Pharaoh's command. Remember, that's why Moses was going down the water in the first place in the little bucket as a little baby, because he was going to be murdered. This last commandment, God's last-ditch effort to create empathy was to inflict just the smallest bit, although it was dramatic and extremely painful, surely, and tragic, to inflict and inspire a kind of empathy among the people to realize what they had been doing to the Hebrews all along. It's from this place of understanding that we transition then into talking about the law. Moses finally has the Hebrews. He brings them out of Egypt. Moses goes up on the mountain. And on the mountain now, Moses, you can just imagine, put yourself in this place, right? Having experienced all these things, and you're looking down the mountain, and what do you see? But you see like just the crowds of people, and they don't have any idea like who they are or how to be, right? They've never been a people before. When they came into Egypt, they were just like Jacob's like family, right? It was just like they came into Egypt as a family, but now they are a people. They've never had a law. They've never had sacrifices. They've never had a relationship with God apart from remembering the covenant. Moses is looking down and like, we're gonna create a new society. This is a whole new thing, a whole new people. They're the people of God, and they need some direction. What are you going to tell them? How are you going to direct them? If it was on you to create a whole new society, on what foundation would you seek to build the groundwork? Here's where I want to say something about the law. We tend to think of the law as like, well, this is a list of things I'm supposed to do, right? This is a list of things I'm supposed to do. I want you to see it in a bigger sense for a second. In some ways, what it is it's a picture of what an ideal society would look like. It's not so much about just what you would do, and in fact, you could even flip it around and say, if you came into a community, what would you have a right to have the character of that community be? What ought to be your rights in this new place that you walk into? Moses is creating a much bigger thing when he gives the law. And if you hear the commandments in this perspective, I think you hear something a little bit different. What we hear is Moses is saying, when you come into a society, you have a right to be in a place where where there is a sense of reverence, and where there is an ethical awareness and an honoring of that which is higher than themselves. I am the Lord your God. We remember God, and we put nothing above this highest ethical understanding and our highest reverence, our own desire for material possessions, our own desire for things for ourselves, our selfishness. Nothing goes above the reverence that all of us have for God in this place, in this community, in this new world that we are creating. And in the same sense, we watch our words. We do not mock that which is highest. We do not mock that which is best. We do not mock truth and make it look like it is low. We do not mock blessedness and make it look like it's harm. We do not mock God and say that God is low or that God is evil. We do not mock that which is best, but we revere it. And we hold it to the highest, in the highest regard. In the same way, in this society, we all have a right to have balance. And there will be balance in this place. We will not simply work and work and work and work and work so we could do more and more and more and more and have more and more and more and more, because that's not what life is about. We've been given gifts and talents and skills and energy, and so we should do work that is valuable, work that matters, but also we must have a space for rest. And in this society, not only will you rest, we will let our children rest too. We will let our male and female slaves, even the slaves, get to rest. Even the animals get to rest. Later in the Old Testament, it will be extrapolated and say every 7 years, even the land gets to rest. Every 7 years, the Israelites would ultimately say, even the people who are in over their head financially, what's the word for that? Were you debt? Every 7 years, the debts will be released. Every 7 times 7 years, all the land will go back to who used to own it. So no one person over the course of a 49 years will be able to own everybody else's houses, everyone else's lands, and throw everything out of balance. No, every 7 times 7, every Jubilee, 49th year, all the land goes back to who used to own it. Because in this society, we will have balance, we will allow rest, we will let things revert back to a place where everything is in its own order. You have a right in this society to be respected when you get old. In the same way it's not all about work. Human beings' value is not just about work, and when people get older and they can do less work, where people get older and they have less capacity than they used to have, we don't throw them away, we don't push them aside, we don't stop caring about them. In their day, they were doing the best they could with what they had, and now in their older years, we will honor them, and we will care for them. And when you are older, you have a right to expect that too. In this society, you will not have to worry about being murdered, because we will hold life and things that give life to the highest degree. In this society, you have a right to believe that no one will try to undermine your relationships. No one will go to your spouse or your significant others and try to draw them away from you or sneak them away from you. So you always have to be watching and careful and protecting and all of these things and looking at people askance. No, they will honor your marriage vows, and they will therefore give a respectful and appropriate distance between themselves and the people who are close to you. In your society, in this society, you have a right not to worry about people coming and taking your things. That will not happen here. In this, should I be doing my fingers so you can remember? We're up to this one. In this society, you don't have to worry about people lying about you and throwing you in front of the court, because we will not do that. We will speak truth, and we will seek to have a society grounded on truth, not on lies, not on propaganda, but on what is right. And finally, in this society, we will all respect each other's things. And we will not live in a constant sense of yearning, right? Of wanting what is other people's things, but there will be a sense of peace. That we're all on our own path, and what anyone has is what their own things are. They don't have to have yours, you don't have to have theirs. There is an honorable sense of respect. This is Moses looking down the mountain. He says, this is the kind of society where everyone will be honored. This is the kind of society where whether you're rich or poor, you will have value and you will be able to live in a sense of peace. You will not be able to be taken advantage of. This is the kind of society that will care for the sojourner and they'll be welcome in their land, that will respect the animals, respect even the slaves, respect the land. This is the beginnings of the society that God would desire. And so the scripture tells us that when Moses was on the mountain, it was God who revealed this to him. I imagine it wasn't like, okay, are you getting this? Number 4. Are you ready? Okay. I'm about to go. You got the style. You're not holding the hammer. Pick up the hammer. Okay, here we go. Number 4. I imagine it was something more of like an inspiration as Moses was praying and remembering and thinking and hoping and looking that God revealed to him these things, and he wrote them down and he could tell when they were good. That's Moses, that's the law. The last thing I want to tell you is about love. Because we also don't tend to think of these commandments as acts of love. They look a lot more like about stuff I'm supposed to do. But when Jesus said to his people, I have not come to abolish the law, I've come to fulfill it. We see that in Jesus. There is a sense that love is at the foundation of these things. In fact, when he says, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor, these are the two foundations of the two tablets, right? The two sections of the law. Love the Lord your God is the first 4 laws. I'm the Lord your God. You'll have no one in front of me. Honor your words, especially my word, and keep the Sabbath day and keep it holy. That's loving God. We love God by doing those things. And loving neighbor is the other 6. You want to remember them? You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet. See these things as ways of loving. And in fact, in love, there's a way to even take them to the highest degree. I am the Lord your God. That you hold compassion and ethics and goodness above all else, and you put nothing above those things in your life. Through love, you hold those high. Through love, you honor your words, and you make sure that everything that you say is true and that it is noble, and that you never take what is high and call it low. That through your life, in love, you allow yourself to rest. People often say, love God, love your neighbor. Where's love yourself? Well, this is a really good one to start with. Have you taken a whole day of rest? Does that sound like a good command? You can bet that the slaves, when Moses said this one, they were like, you don't have to tell us that one again. We've spent our whole lives. I said, what? You said 1 out of every 7? Wait, did you say 7? Don't tell him. He might have meant 10. He might have meant 20. He said 7. We're holding up to 7. They would have been thrilled. Do you ever feel like a slave? Like you're being driven? Like your whole life is exhausting? God would love for you to give yourself a break. He put it in the Old Testament, made it one of the 10 commandments. Here's a nice way to think of it. Sundown on Saturday to sundown on Sunday. Sunday night you can work. Okay? Saturday afternoon you can mow the lawn. But try from sundown on Saturday through on Sabbath and Sunday you worship. Sunday afternoon, give yourself rest till 5 or 6 o'clock, dinner time. When the sun goes down, you can go be busy again. But give yourself that rest out of love. And you know what? If you do it, through you might be giving your spouse or significant other permission to do it too. You might be giving your children permission to do it too. Your male and female slaves, if you talk to me if that applies to you. Your animals, whatever the things might be, through love. And through love, I want to invite you to see these last 5 in the bigger picture. It's not only don't murder, it's stand up for justice, stand up for equality, stand up for equity, stand against war when it is oppressing people, anything that causes murder. Become a person out of love who stands for what is right and stands for preserving and protecting life. Become a person who it's not only about about honoring your father and mother, but look for the elderly in our society and care for them and honor them. I learned a long time ago the best thing you can say to an older person, write this down. Could you give me some advice? They've lived their whole lives. They've lived for decades. They have so much experience from so many places and nobody cares. Honestly, don't just ask them for advice. Become somebody who desires it. Say, can I tell you about my life? What are your thoughts on this? What do you think might be best? Be surprised. You might be surprised how much good they have to share. Become a person who in love honors the people who are around you, honors the society, honors what is best. When Jesus says, I've come to fulfill the law, the fact of the matter is, the more your love draws you into God, the more this love draws you into caring for one another, the more that love is drawing you into Christ. And that Christ life will bring resurrection life into you. And any kind of death that would want to come against you will fall flat and be abolished. And you'll be one who, just like Moses on that mountain, is able to stand and worship in the light.